And when her eyes found mine, the conference room fell silent the moment she walked in. Not because she demanded it, but because everything about her presence commanded attention without a single word. Maya Kapoor, the new CEO of Horizon Media, moved through the glass doors like she owned not just the company, but the very air we breathed. Her tailored charcoal suit hugged her frame perfectly, her dark hair pulled back in a sleek bun that revealed the sharp angles of her face. But it was her eyes that stopped me cold. Those deep brown eyes that seemed to see through every wall I had ever built around myself. I was just Aria Chen, her new executive assistant, standing there with a tablet clutched against my chest like a shield, trying to remember how to breathe normally, while my heart hammered against my ribs in a way that terrified me because I knew exactly what it meant. And I knew I could never, ever let it show. I had taken this job because I needed it, because the bills were piling up and my previous company had gone under, leaving me scrambling for stability in a city that devoured the weak. What I hadn't expected was to walk into an office on my first day and feel the ground shift beneath my feet the moment my new boss looked at me, really looked at me, with an intensity that made me feel both seen and exposed. Maya was professional, always professional, but there were moments, fleeting, dangerous moments, when her gaze would linger a second too long, when her fingers would brush against mine as she handed me documents, when I would catch her watching me from across the room with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. I told myself I was imagining things, that I was projecting my own impossible feelings onto a woman who was so far above me in every way that even thinking about her like this felt like a betrayal of the professional relationship we were supposed to maintain. If you believe in stories about courage, about finding love in unexpected places, about taking chances even when everything tells you not to, then please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this story, and subscribe to channel name. Because your support helps us bring more heartfelt stories to life. Comment below if you've ever felt something you weren't supposed to feel, if you've ever stood at the edge of something, beautiful and terrifying at the same time. The weeks blurred together in a haze of early mornings and late nights, of standing beside Maya in meetings where she commanded rooms full of executives twice her age, of watching her navigate corporate politics with a grace and ruthlessness that left me in awe. She trusted me with everything, her schedule, her confidential files, her coffee order that I had memorized down to the exact temperature she preferred. We developed a rhythm, an unspoken understanding that made us efficient and seamless as a team. But beneath that professional veneer, something else was growing. Something neither of us acknowledged, but both of us felt crackling in the air between us like static electricity before a storm. I learned the way her jaw tightened when she was frustrated, the way she rubbed her temples when a migraine was coming on, the way her entire face softened when she smiled, which wasn't often, but when it happened, it felt like the sun breaking through clouds. The breaking point came on a Thursday night when the office was empty except for us, the city lights glittering through the floor-to-ceiling windows like a million tiny promises. We had been working on a merger deal for weeks, and Maya had barely slept, barely eaten, pushing herself to exhaustion, because that was who she was, someone who gave everything to what she believed in. I found her in her office, head in her hands, shoulders trembling, in a way that made my chest tighten, painfully because I had never seen her vulnerable before. Without thinking, I crossed the room and placed my hand gently on her shoulder, and she looked up at me with eyes that were red-rimmed and filled with a weariness that went deeper than any work deadline. She didn't pull away. Instead, she reached up and covered my hand with hers, and in that moment, with her fingers curled around mine and the weight of everything unspoken hanging between us, I knew we had crossed a line that we could never uncross. What happened next wasn't planned, wasn't calculated, wasn't anything either. Of us had prepared for, despite all the meetings we had, orchestrated and presentations, we had rehearsed. Maya stood up slowly, her hand still holding mine, and she looked at me with such raw honesty that it stripped away every professional pretense we had maintained. She told me she had been fighting what she felt since the day I walked into her office, that every moment of restraint had been agony, that she knew it was wrong because I worked for her and she held power over my career and my livelihood, but that she couldn't keep pretending she didn't dream about me, didn't wonder what it would be like To stop being the boss and just be someone who cared about me in ways that had nothing to do with quarterly reports and business strategies. My response came not in words but in action, in the way I stepped closer, in the way my free hand reached up to cup her face, in the way I whispered that I had been fighting the same battle and losing every single day. Our first kiss happened against the backdrop of the city we both loved, slow and tentative and earth-shatteringly perfect in ways that movies and books had tried to capture, but never quite managed. Maya kissed like she did everything else with complete focus and intensity, and when she pulled back, there were tears streaming down both our faces because we both knew this changed everything. We sat on the floor of her office that night, our backs against her desk, and talked until dawn painted the sky pink and gold. She told me about growing up different in a conservative family, about hiding who she was for so long that she had almost forgotten how to be authentic, about building her career into armor because if she was successful enough, powerful enough, maybe people would overlook the rest. I told her about my own journey of acceptance, about the relationships I had sabotaged because I was terrified of being hurt, about choosing this job thinking I could keep my heart safely locked away only to have her demolish every defense I had without even trying. The next weeks were a careful dance of discretion and stolen moments, of learning each other in the spaces between professional obligations. We couldn't be open about what was happening between us. The company had strict policies about relationships between supervisors and their direct reports, and Maya's position was already scrutinized by board members, looking for any weakness they could exploit. So we became experts at secret glances across meeting rooms, at fingers brushing under tables during presentations, at late nights in the office that weren't entirely about work anymore. Maya would order dinner for us and we would eat in her office with the door locked, talking about everything from philosophy to our favorite childhood memories, to the future we were both terrified and thrilled to imagine together. She made me laugh in ways I hadn't in years, saw parts of me that I had kept hidden from everyone else, and loved those parts fiercely and without reservation. But secrets have a way of becoming heavier the longer you carry them, and the strain of hiding what we meant to each other began to take its toll. I hated lying to my coworkers who asked about my personal life, hated the way Maya had to maintain a cold, professional distance in public while I knew the warmth she saved for private moments. There were times when I would catch her, looking at me during meetings with an expression so carefully neutral it hurt. Times when I wanted to scream that the most incredible woman I had ever known was mine, and I was hers, but we couldn't tell anyone because the world wasn't ready to let us have this without judgment. The fear was constant, fear that someone would notice, that we would slip up, that the very thing that made us happiest would be weaponized against us and destroy everything Maya had worked so hard to build. The crisis came when David Martinez, a senior vice president who had wanted Maya's position and never forgiven her for getting it instead, began asking pointed questions about the amount of time she spent with me. He made comments in meetings about how close we seemed, how unusual it was for a CEO to work so directly with an assistant, how perhaps some boundaries needed to be re-established for the sake of professional appearances. Maya handled it with her usual composure, but I could see the panic in her eyes when we were alone, could feel the tension in her body when I held her at night in her apartment, where we were finally free to be ourselves without pretense. She started pulling away during work hours, became almost harsh in her professional interactions with me, and I understood why, but it broke something inside me every time she looked through me like I was nothing more than a competent employee. We reached our breaking point on a rainy Monday when Maya called me into her office and closed the door with a finality that made my stomach drop. She stood with her back to me, looking out at the storm lashing against the windows, and told me in a voice that shook despite her attempt at control that she thought I should transfer to another department, that she had already spoken to HR about finding me a position with equal pay and responsibilities, but under a different supervisor. She said it was the only way to protect both of us, that if David or anyone else discovered the truth about our relationship, well, I reported to her, it could destroy her career and mine, that she cared about me too much to let me go down with her if everything fell apart. I stood there listening to her, sacrifice what we had built together, in the name of protection, and something inside me just snapped because I was tired of hiding, tired of being afraid, tired of living like love was something to be ashamed of instead of celebrated. I told Maya no. I told her that I was done running from who I was and what I felt, that she had taught me what it meant to be brave in every other aspect of my life, and now it was time to be brave about this too. I said that if we were going to end this relationship, it needed to be because we didn't love each other anymore, not because we were scared of what other people might think or say. I reminded her that she had built her entire career on refusing to let others dictate who she should be, and that this was no different either. We believed that what we had was worth fighting for, or we didn't, but we couldn't keep trying to have it both ways. The silence that followed was excruciating, filled only with the sound of rain and our ragged breathing, and I genuinely didn't know which way she would go until she turned around, and I saw her face, saw the determination there that I recognized from every impossible deal she had ever closed. Maya walked to her desk, picked up her phone, and scheduled a meeting with HR and the board of directors for the following morning. She told me that she was going to disclose our relationship, request that I be transferred to a different reporting structure, and make it clear that while she had crossed professional boundaries, she had no intention of apologizing for falling in love with someone who made her want to be a better person. She said that if they wanted her resignation over this, they could have it, but she was done hiding who she was and who she loved, because the cost of secrecy had become higher than any professional consequence could ever be. I felt terror and pride and love wash over me in equal measure as I watched her make that decision, as I realized that she was choosing us even when it meant risking everything she had worked for since she was young and determined to prove her worth to a world that doubted her at every turn. The meeting was brutal. The board members were shocked. Some were supportive, others were openly hostile. David Martinez tried to argue that Maya had shown poor judgment and abused her position of power, that I must have been coerced or manipulated into the relationship because why else would an assistant get involved with her boss? But Maya shut him down with a calm ferocity that reminded everyone why she had been chosen to lead the company in the first place. She presented documentation showing that she had already arranged for my transfer before disclosing the relationship, that there had been no favoritism in my assignments or evaluations, that everything had been handled as ethically as possible given the circumstances. She also made it clear that if the board had a problem with her being in a same-sex relationship, she wanted to hear that explicitly stated, because she would not work for an organization that discriminated based on sexual orientation, and she would not hesitate to make that discrimination public. If this story has touched your heart, if it has made you think about love and courage and what it means to be truly authentic in a world that often demands we hide parts of ourselves, then please leave a like on this video and share it with someone who needs to hear this message today. Comment below and tell us about a time when you chose love over fear, when you decided that being true to yourself was worth whatever consequences came your way. Your engagement means everything and helps stories like this reach people who need them most. In the end, the board agreed to keep Maya on as CEO with the understanding that our relationship would be disclosed company-wide and that I would transfer to the marketing department where I would report to someone else entirely. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was honest. And honesty felt like a victory after so many months of hiding. The company announcement was met with mixed reactions. Some people were supportive, others were judgmental. A few made it clear they thought less of both of us for crossing professional boundaries regardless of our efforts to handle the situation responsibly. But something shifted in me during those difficult weeks of adjustment, something fundamental about understanding that I couldn't control what other people thought or said, only how I responded to it and whether I let their opinions diminish what I knew to be true about my own heart and choices. Maya and I moved forward together, no longer as boss and assistant, but as partners, navigating a complicated world with honesty and love as our foundation. We went public with our relationship in all the ways that mattered, holding hands at company events, introducing each other as girlfriends rather than colleagues, refusing to hide the affection we felt even when it made others uncomfortable. It wasn't always easy, and there were moments when the scrutiny and judgment felt overwhelming. But there was freedom and authenticity that made every challenge worthwhile. I discovered that Maya in love was somehow even more remarkable than Maya in power. She was softer, more open, more willing to be vulnerable in ways that her professional persona never allowed. We built a life together in the spaces between work obligations, creating traditions and memories and a sense of home that neither of us had quite experienced before. Before we reach the end, I want to ask you something from the heart. If this story made you feel something, if it reminded you that love is worth fighting for no matter how complicated the circumstances, then please take a moment to comment below with a heart emoji and the word love to show your support for authentic stories about real emotions and brave choices. Looking back now, I understand that falling in love with Maya Kapoor wasn't the mistake. I once feared it might be. It was the most honest, courageous thing I have ever done. She taught me that being professional doesn't mean being emotionless, that leadership isn't about perfection but about integrity, and that sometimes the most radical act of rebellion is simply refusing to hide who you love. Our story isn't a fairy tale with a perfect ending where everyone approves and nothing is complicated, but it's real, and it's ours, and that makes it more valuable than any sanitized version could ever be. We still face challenges, still navigate the complexities of being a same-sex couple in environments that aren't always welcoming, but we face them together with the knowledge that we chose each other when choosing each other was the hardest thing to do, and that foundation is stronger than any opposition we might encounter. Maya still leads her company with the same fierce dedication she always had, but now there's a lightness to her that wasn't there before, a joy that comes from finally being whole instead of fractured between who she was at work and who she was in private. And me, I found my own voice and strength in ways I never expected. Discovered that loving someone extraordinary doesn't diminish you, but instead reveals capacities for courage and authenticity you never knew existed within yourself, waiting for the right moment and the right person to call them forth into the light where they belong.